Emergency news in the world of fantasy football. Joined by behind the scenes guy Drew, the fantasy viewer, here to break down the panic that is happening right now in Jacksonville. Mason, give me the details, please.
Hey guys, so we're looking at Travis Etienne, first round draft pick from Jacksonville Jaguars. He was slated to be the number one running back on the depth chart, but now with this Liz Frank injury, suffered to the foot. Basically, it is a ligament tear. It's gonna allow the foot to not be as stable. It is a season-ending injury. He might be able to come back come time playoffs if they were able to make it, but I don't see the Jacksonville Jaguars making it to the playoffs this year. This leaves running back James Robinson, last year's breakout running back, to come back and take over that number one running back position.
So, as Mason just said, James Robinson, he's an RB1 on an NFL team. Carlos Hyde is also there, backing him up. Now, obviously, Robinson's stock is going up, but I would just recommend that you slow down on maybe potentially drafting him early just because he is an RB1 with the veteran Carlos Hyde behind him. Also, Jacksonville is just not a good team. They got a bunch of question marks. The head coach is a question mark. Quarterback's a question mark. Now you have James Robinson, but the only people that I really view as fantasy relevant until we can see are the wide receivers. I see them being down a lot, and they're going to have to throw the ball. So that will hurt James Robinson a little bit unless they're able to come out of the gates and they're actually able to put up a fight. He just might not produce like a true RB1, and Stone has that argument for you.
Yeah, I think to counter that I think he still can sit up there in possible like finishing top 12 like RB1 status this year as a fantasy guy because you saw what he was capable of doing last year with an arguably worse Jaguars offense. I think it's questionable. Trevor Lawrence could be better than Minshew. He could not be better than Minshew. Who knows? But the receiving core, Chenault's getting older, Chark's getting older. They're only better now. And, I mean, Carlos Hyde's an all right backup to him, I guess. Obviously, their line isn't anything special either, but I still think James Robinson has the potential to stay very, very relevant. And I think you don't want to reach for him in drafts, but if you see him still sitting there like the 7th or 8th rounds like you've been seeing him, you might want to nab him in like the 7th or 6th because that's going to be great value.
Honestly, I would take James Robinson right now. I would feel comfortable taking him in the 5th or 6th round, but these new draft strategies we've been trying where I've taken 3 running backs right off the rip, I wouldn't even question to take James Robinson until the 7th or 8th round. I would probably take him there if I had my 3 running backs. What do you think, Drew?
No, I'm fine with that. If you're doing the 3 running backs in the first 4 picks, I think that's a great strategy because you still have a player that can produce if he's the same player he was last year. Kind of like what Stone was saying, like, is Lawrence better than Minshew? The good thing is you still have Minshew there. So, like, you kind of know, even if Lawrence doesn't perform, you know how Minshew will. The only issue I follow Dan Orlovsky on Twitter, and he was tweeting yesterday during the game, and he was just mentioning how archaic the offense looked. So play calling could also be a factor that could hinder his potential ceiling as that RB1 top 12.
Regardless, ETN is done for the year, so if you've been having these early drafts, shame on you guys because, like we said in a previous podcast, this is why you want to wait because injuries do happen, and ETN was one of those mid-round running backs that was very highly sought after because he was going to have a pretty prominent role in that offense. We're going to transition away from the ETN injury now, and we're going to talk a little bit about Monday Night Football, more specifically Jameis Winston and Marquez Callaway solidifying why they are the QB1 and receiver 1 week 1 for the Saints. I just want to start by saying Marquez Callaway, I talked about it in a previous podcast. I've been talking to these guys for a few weeks now about how I'm pretty sure that he was going to be the breakout candidate this year at receiver. and this Monday night game kind of solidified that to me. I think he has a very high potential of hitting 1,000 yards this year, having Pro Bowl-esque numbers, maybe not becoming a Pro Bowler, but I see a lot of talent from this kid. I mean, the one-handed catch over his shoulder, tracking the ball on the diving touchdown. I mean, the guy he showed he balled out.
Yeah, he did amazing. 5 targets, 5 catches. The 2 touchdowns were incredible. The first touchdown, they called pass interference because they knocked him down, and he still caught it. It was amazing. Jameis Winston, he went 9 for 10. He had 123 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. He looked pretty good. I could say he's definitely learned a thing or two from Drew Brees. He came out slinging the ball. He was not scared to, like he was previously, not scared to launch the ball downfield. We've gotten some updates recently from Sleeper. They said that Jameis Winston has solidified that number 1 role, basically, and we also kind of said that that's what we thought was going to happen. Drew, do you have anything to say on this?
I think Jameis should have been the clear-cut number 1 from the get-go. Taysom Hill, he's just that gadget guy. And I think Jameis brings more of an actual quarterback experience, especially taking over for Drew Brees now that he's not there anymore, which is kind of weird to say. But I will say I wrote down some of Jameis's his career year when he threw for 5,109 yards. He still had a 60% completion percentage. He still had 33 touchdowns with 30 interceptions. So, to counter what Mason just said, what did you say his stats were from last night?
9 of 10, 123 yards, and 2 touchdowns.
So,
90%
he could have 90% completion, correct. But that's where these stats right here, from his best year in the NFL, he threw that ball another 10 times. What could that have looked like? You see what I'm saying? He could have had.
I agree.
He might have thrown for 4 touchdowns, but 2 of them would have been to the other team for a pick 6.
I do think Jameis Winston has come in. He looked at this as his last chance in the NFL. I believe he probably took that to heart. He probably learned from Drew Brees. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a completely different Jameis Winston. That being said, did he get that LASIK surgery? Did he claim to get that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yep. I hope he did. Jesus. But anyways, it was a great performance by him. Taysom Hill came in. He had 11 of 20, 138 yards, 1 touchdown. He's not showing to be the better quarterback right now. I believe Taysom Hill is going to come in and just be that gadget player that he's been with Sean Payton. And I think Sean Payton loves him. And Sean Payton was given him all the chances in the world to become the starting quarterback. And I just don't think that's him. But, yeah, that's basically what I have to say on that.
Jameis Winston had an entire year.
Go ahead.
Jameis Winston had an entire year to learn under arguably one of the smartest and most accurate quarterbacks of all time. And if there were 2 problems that Jameis Winston had when he played for Tampa Bay, was his decision-making and his accuracy. So if he learned anything from Drew Brees, that is a fantastic sign for New Orleans. And anybody who's saying New Orleans isn't going to be a contender this year, well, they may just as well be wrong, because if Jameis Winston comes out and looks like a good quarterback, that team is a contender again, if Michael Thomas plays, especially.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
So, just to hit back, he got LASIK surgery. He doesn't see 20/20. He sees 30/30, right?
That's pretty good.
So with that being said, I agree 100%. I think he has learned a lot. I think maturity was kind of his biggest issue as well. And it seems like he's actually growing up some, so that should also help. To hit on Marquez Callaway, he had a great performance. And I think that he could be a solid number 2. I think he's still going to be number 2 when Michael Thomas comes back. It's just a matter of time. When does he come back? It's still up in there. But I think if Jameis, even though his upside is there, if he reverts back to still throwing, 30 and 30, then what kind of team is that going to be? We don't know if they're going to try to run the ball more, or is Sean Payton going to kind of try to help Jameis not throw as much so he's not throwing 30 and 30. And I just think, in a sense, you could look at Marquez Callaway as the Travis Fulgham of the Philadelphia Eagles last year. He could come in and he could end up producing like no other. And then as soon as Michael Thomas and in the Eagles situation, for whatever reason, Alshon Jeffrey comes back, you just take a back seat and you don't even see him play. So that's my 2 cents on that, and just kind of everything we're saying right now, just take with a grain of salt and kind of develop your own thoughts on this and dive into it and see what you can figure out.
We've been talking about taking Marquez Callaway very late in drafts a lot, but with this preseason outing, I think people are actually going to be starting to take him in higher rounds, maybe like 13 or 14, kind of taking the fly on the guy. And Jameis Winston, even drafting him now looks like it could be a very good idea, because even when he threw the 30-30, he still slung 5,100 yards, and he'd get you 30 points fantasy every single week. So don't be afraid to draft him in fantasy. Even if he looks bad in games, he's still going to produce the numbers. Do you guys have anything else to talk about today?
No, that was our quick breaking news segment. We just wanted to get this out there.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to add, he had that career year. They were 7-9, so they weren't very good. So to your point, you could draft Jameis later, and then you could have him because he's going to have to throw all the time, and that could be very beneficial, even with the interceptions, to help your fantasy team.
Yep. Thank you, Drew, for coming on and helping us out with this breaking news segment. And as always, we are the Fantasy Few. Mason, do you want to get us out of here?
Fantasy Few out, baby.